Hey, it's Glenn, and this is my video where I'm just going to kind of ramble on about The Ghost in the Olive Grove for a few minutes. The Ghost in the Olive Grove, which has been free for the past 5 days. This is the last day. If you're watching this after July 26th, it's no longer free on the Amazon Kindle, but I'm hoping that people have had time to read it, and if you haven't read it, probably don't watch this video because I may or may not, I honestly have no idea what I'm going to talk about. I'm just I turned on the camera and here we go. But I might spoil things, that's all I'm saying. So if you don't want spoilers, you still have today to download it for free. Otherwise, it's going to be 99 cents. So hopefully you can afford it. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, it's always free for you. So go ahead and read it. Then come back and I'll talk to you about it. The Ghost in the Olive Grove, it's funny because everyone who reads it, who I hear back from, always tells me how terrified they were by it. I've had a couple people tell me that they couldn't even finish it because they were so frightened by the story, and I'm just like, what was scary about it? It was just an interesting story. It was just a ghost story. I honestly, my work, I'm sure there's an exception, but I can't think of it right now. I write a lot of horror and it doesn't frighten me. I just think they're interesting concepts. Ghosts fascinate me in general. And I love ghost stories. I grew up on ghost stories. I had crazy uncles. I had uncles who, when all the cousins would spend the night, would make crucifixes out of aluminum foil and tell us to hold on to it so that the vampires don't get us. Some of my cousins and I, to this day, tend to sleep with our covers up around our necks just because of that childhood thing. So that was my childhood. It takes a lot to scare me. So I always think it's funny when people are frightened by the story, because I guess I write horror, but I don't write it to frighten people. I don't know why I write horror stories, really. But that's one of my two big... lately I write a lot of fantasy stories, but I still have a lot of horror stories in me, and that's where my writing career pretty much began, was in the horror genre. So, The Ghost in the Olive Grove, perhaps it frightened you, but it started out as a joke. I had a friend, incidentally, named Amy, like the protagonist of the story, and there was one of those stupid email questionnaire things, like, fill this out about me, and so I filled it out about her, and I was just completely ridiculous, and it said something like, where am I going to be in 10 years? And I painted this picture of her with all of these children and this misery, and her only solace was that she was having an affair with the ghost in the olive grove or something. And then it just kind of rang around in my head for a while, and I'm like, the ghost in the olive grove, I want to write that story, and so I did. I don't really recall a lot about the process of writing the story, how long it took me, or anything like that. I just know I made the character, the protagonist, was very much based on my friend Amy, and the ghost was just somewhere in my mind. But, some authors just will not talk about what the story means to them. Reader interpretation trumps artist intention. And I think both are valid. I think it's interesting to know an author's take on a story as far as the symbolism, the metaphors, which I use a lot of. The Ghost in the Olive Grove, I'm going to say I didn't intentionally write it as a metaphor. But looking at it, it's kind of like, I look at my work kind of like dreams, and they can be interpreted, and they can tell you something about my subconscious, or there's some subconscious message that permeates the story. A lot of times I write intentional metaphors, like the rainbow-colored sheep, or the Briar Patch Evangelist was just a not at all veiled allegory. But The Ghost in the Olive Grove, here's how I interpret it. It's about a woman who is obsessed with the past. The ghost represents the past. Like, you have the character of Amy, who her husband has left her, she's miserable, she's drinking her sorrows away. So, you know, that's kind of, it's a road that everybody, it's a kind of a fork in the road that everybody comes to at some point in life, where are you going to dwell on what you've lost? Are you going to dwell on the past and look backwards? Or are you going to dust yourself off, shake the past off, and move forward? So in The Ghost in the Olive Grove, the ghost obviously symbolizes the past. Amy gets very intrigued by the past. She goes intrigued by the ghost. She goes out there, she interacts with it, she makes it more real. The more power she gives the ghost, the more control it has over her. The more she won't let go of the ghost, the more solid the ghost becomes, the more it can come into her life and take over. Which ultimately, and again, spoilers if you haven't read the story, Amazon.com. Go now. It's a very short story. Come back, unpause, and I will tell you this. So, the end of the story, of course, the ghost possesses Amy and takes over her life completely. Which is again part of the symbolism that she embraced the past and she was consumed by the past. She didn't move forward after her crisis. So that's pretty much, that's my take on The Ghost in the Olive Grove. It doesn't frighten me, and I just think it's interesting, and it's a metaphor about looking backwards and dreaming over your glory days and the past take over your future and erase it. So that's, you know, that's pretty much it. I don't really know what else to say about The Ghost in the Olive Grove. Interesting fact, I toyed at one point very briefly with writing a couple of sequels to this story that just felt wrong. So don't ever look for like The Ghost in the Olive Grove 2, because, which I said about Nightlight, which we'll get to soon. But, and I'm working on Nightlight 3 now, after I said I'd never write Nightlight 2. But, I mean, I'm pretty sure, I feel like the end of The Ghost in the Olive Grove was in fact the end. It does kind of leave you wondering, well, what happened? What happened to Amy after all of this weirdness? But honestly, I don't know. For all I know, the ghost is still in Amy's body, wandering around and living his or her life, and Amy is still trapped in the olive grove. That's kind of where I think that went. I think so. I mean, there's no sequel there, just in case you were wondering, but there almost was, because I was almost, you know, I was almost an idiot. Anyway, so next up is going to be Aries Cage. That's going to be, it's a short little depressing story I wrote about a bird, same year as The Ghost in the Olive Grove, and so that'll be tomorrow. But for now, The Ghost in the Olive Grove is still free today, so check it out if you haven't already, and that's all I've got for now, so have fun and I'll talk to y'all later.